What is your most common use for the pocket knives that you carry on a daily basis? How's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And let me know in the comment section down below what you most commonly use your knives for. While you're down there, smack the like button. It tells YouTube that you enjoy this type of content. Today, we're talking shop on the Vosteed Valkyrie, a knife that came out, sold out, dropped again, sold out. How do I have one? Well, it's all thanks to my friends over at White Mountain Knives, who were so cool and sent me one before they sold out so that I could review it and give you the goods. You see, today we're not just talking about how much I like this knife. This isn't a regular review. No, we're going to take it a step further and we're actually going to rank this Valkyrie. That's right, it's another episode of Grail or Garbage, the series where I systematically and categorically rank and review knives to give you the context that you need to determine if a knife like this Valkyrie deserves a spot in your pocket. Does it deserve a spot in your EDC rotation? Here's how it works. Our leaderboard consists of 5 categories. Those categories are materials, ergonomics, fidget factor, the lock, and finally fit and finish. Each category is worth a max of 10 points, and at the end, we will add up all of the scores, do a tiny bit of math, and then place it on our leaderboard, which looks a little bit like this. And once we do, we will finally know, is the Vosteed Valkyrie a Grail, or is it garbage? And here we are with the Vosteed Valkyrie. This knife sold out so quickly. It's been dropped like 2 or 3 times on retail websites, and each time it does, it sells quickly. So today we're going to be aiming to give you the context that you need to determine, is it a knife that deserves a spot in your pocket? Does it deserve a spot in your EDC rotation? So let's start off by talking about the materials. Now, materials is not just what the knife is made up of, it's also what does it cost, because everyone knows it doesn't matter how nice a knife is if you can't afford it, and sometimes the value does not make sense based on the materials. So how much does it cost? Well, this particular model is the Seax version, and it goes for $79.99. I got this one from my friends over at White Mountain Knives. They did loan it to me, but I reached out to them and they did agree to actually sell it to me. So huzzah, this is my Vosteed Valkyrie, and I love it. So the materials in question are G10 handle scales, 154 cm blade. It's got a shadow boxed steel liner, stamped steel pocket clip, and a single-sided captive pivot. All in all, for $79.99, I think that this is pretty dang good. 154 cm is an excellent user steel. It's tried and true. It's got a little bit of everything, and it's well-rounded. It's going to hold an edge really well. It's going to be not too terribly difficult to sharpen, and it's going to be somewhat stainless as well. I really like these materials at this price point, and it's enough for me to give it an 8 out of 10 for materials. The next category is ergonomics. How does it feel in the hand? Is it comfortable? Is it uncomfortable? Are there any hot spots? Can you switch up your grip? Does it make sense in different use case scenarios? Well, the ergonomics on here are pretty good. And a lot of that has to do with these slab style G10 handle scales that have a little bit of contouring on here. You do have a little bit of a index finger cutout, I guess is what I'll call it, as well as a finger cutout up here. And ultimately, it's kind of a choose your own path type of ergonomic situation. And you can do a reverse grip, you can do a saber grip, you can do a pull grip. The nice thing about having more of a neutral style on the handle scales is that you can get an obscure grip like this. And apparently some people do use knives in a pull grip situation, I guess. Let me know if you're one of those who does that. I've never used a knife like that, but apparently it's a thing. Furthermore, we do have some jimping here, and because this is a Seax style blade, the spine goes up to an apex and then curves down, which creates a really good spot for your thumb to rest on the back in a regular saber grip. You can, of course, choke up because of this mild cutout here. One thing that I will say is I do kind of wish that they were a bit more aggressive on that cutout to make it a bit easier to put your finger there. It's not that it doesn't fit or it doesn't work, it definitely does, but it is something that I kind of wish they had just been a little bit more aggressive on, and they weren't. In a reverse style grip, your thumb rests naturally at the top of the handle scales, and that actually feels pretty darn good. So if you're doing an ice pick type motion, it's going to work out a-okay. The ergonomics are pretty good. They're not amazing and they're not awful, and so for those reasons, it's going to be getting a 7 out of 10 for ergonomics. Next up is my favorite category. Let's talk about the Fidget Factor. And before you think that Fidget Factor just means that we're playing with it, here's what Fidget Factor includes. With Fidget Factor, we got to talk about the pivot type. We've got to talk about the detent. We've got to talk about the action, as well as how comfortable and easy is it to play with. Because the more you handle a knife, the better you are when you go to actually use it. And so Fidget Factor is indeed very, very important. On that note, it's running on a single-sided captive pivot with bearings, and I believe those are ceramic bearings. It's a very nicely drop shut control type action. It feels very smooth and it flies out without any issues. Because it's a button lock, it's easy to open and close. There's no issues. Your fingers will not get tired opening and closing that knife. And let's be honest, fidgeting is where button locks really shine the most. These are not hard use folders. These are not even hard use situation type knives. You know, it's one of those knives that you carry with you for the basic EDC tasks. Tasks like cutting down cardboard, opening boxes, opening letters, you know, peeling your fruit, so on and so forth. And for those reasons, button locks work really great. As far as fidgeting is concerned, it means that you can do this endlessly without any issue whatsoever. Now, the Valkyrie does have a front flipper as well as a rear flipper, and even though it's a button lock that essentially has no detent, both of these options work rather well. Failed that one. So it's really easy to fidget with. It also has a thumb stud, which is nice, and it doesn't take a whole lot of force or pressure to be able to do this with no wrist action whatsoever. It's a very, very fun knife to carry, and it's one that I'm definitely glad I decided to pick up. Because this knife is so versatile and it also does not weigh a ton, it is very fun to play with, and it's one that you'll want to play with a whole lot. It's something that you can become very proficient in carrying, and the action is excellent. For all of those reasons, it's going to be getting a very, very good 9 out of 10 for Fidget Factor. All right, so let's talk about the lock. The lock on here is somewhat controversial because it is, in fact, a button lock that many people are worried about failing because someone decided to start spine whacking their button locks and they failed. I'm not going to get into that because I made an entire video with my opinion on why I don't agree with that test and why I don't think that it's an issue with this knife specifically. Here's what I'm going to say about this lock. The lock is a button lock, which is essentially a plunge that goes into the tang of the blade and holds the knife in place. It doesn't go all the way through, and so jolts are going to be kind of its weak point. When you jolt the knife, you know, against something with some force or a lot of force, it has a propensity to disengage. Notice how I didn't say fail, I said disengage. That being said, you put a good amount of pressure on the back of this spine and it's not going to disengage. It's the jolt that causes the spring and the plunge to bounce, and then the knife disengages. Some button locks are easier to disengage than others. A very common theme is that when you get button stick or lock stick, it is less likely to disengage with a jolt. But I did have a friend of the channel, G-Ball Vision, who did a bunch of testing on a bunch of button locks because he has a whole lot. And certain button locks that are very popular and very well known, like ProTech and Civivi, as well as Kaiser, were failing. the spine whack test. So with that being said, I don't consider that to be an issue with the brand. I consider that to be an issue with button/plunge lock designs in general. For regular EDC tasks, you really have nothing to worry about because the knife is very stable. That's not going to actually disengage just with force on the back. You have to jolt the button out of place, and at that point it's not a failure, it's just a disengagement based on a set of circumstances. Every single knife lock in the world will fail in certain circumstances. This just happens to be the one that is the weak point for button locks in general. So with all of that being said, I still wish that it was a sturdier lock type and that they still found a way to keep this button actuation so smooth, because most button locks do get lock stick. And that's too bad, because ultimately we would love to have a button lock that is a sturdier button lock. In the end, I don't hold it against the lock itself, but it is also an issue that's worth mentioning. When the knife is deployed, there is no blade play up, down, left, or right. There is no double clutch. And when it falls shut in a centered position. That is perfectly centered. So what are we going to rank it? We're going to be giving it a 6 out of 10 for the lock. And finally, here we are at fit and finish. Fit and finish is not just about how well it was made, it was also about the design language. And let's be honest, designed by Dr. EDC over at Vosteed, he did a phenomenal job. Going for a Seax style blade shape is not very common. It's very ballsy, and you can get this as well in more of a sheep's foot harpoon style blade, which is also cool, and I will be looking forward to trying to get one of those as well. But this is built obviously for EDC, for light cutting tasks, and I think they achieved it. It's not super heavy. The alignment is perfect. The way that it was manufactured from the factory is pretty good. Overall, the only concern that anyone's going to have with this is whether or not it will survive if they decide to hammer the spine of the blade into something. And that's not really a concern for me because I don't use my knives like that. I use my knives to open boxes. I use my knives to open letters, to cut open groceries, you know, regular EDC type stuff. And for those reasons, it's pretty good. The pocket clip is deep carry and it does flip over to the other side. It does not have a backspacer, which I can get over because this is more of an EDC knife. It's not got a super expensive blade that I'm worrying about protecting, and even if the edge does get dull, it will be easy to sharpen. An open back design has the benefit of being easier to clean out, but I still would have preferred that it had a backspacer instead of barrel spacers. So what are we going to give this one? Because the design is good. I feel like the fit and finish from the factory is good. People have concerns about the validity of the button lock. It's not a super big concern for me. I gave it a 6 out of 10, which is just okay. It's not better than average. It's not below average. It's just okay. Ultimately, I really enjoy this knife. I think that this is the type of knife that most people would really enjoy carrying and get the proper amount of use out of. At the end of the day, with the only concern being whether or not you can spine whack this knife, it's still good enough for me to give it a 7 out of 10 for fit and finish. We've gone through all of the categories. It's time that we add them up. Let's put our leaderboard on the screen and let's summarize. For materials, it got an 8. For ergonomics, a 7. For Fidget Factor, it got a 9. The lock is a 6 and fit and finish is a 7. When we add up all of those scores, it gets a 37 out of 50. 37 out of 50 is our high recommend category. And it's going to be sitting right there next to other knives that are high recommend. For example, we have the Spyderco Yojimbo 2, the Finch Buffalo Tooth, the Vero Axon, which is a liner lock, and of course the Wee Roxy 3. That is some stiff competition at that price point, because unlike those other knives that I just mentioned, this one is under $100. If you want one, I will link it down below. Chances are it will be sold out, but you can go ahead and give it the old college try anyways. Guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Do you agree with my score? Do you disagree with my score? Let me know. Either way, I'd love to hear about it. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, boohoo, there's a button for you too. And if you want to see more knife rankings just like this, we do it every week. Make sure you hit subscribe. I'm Rollshambo. I'll catch you on the flip side.